Okay. Let's just start by taking a few moments to center in. Sit up nice and tall. Close the eyes. Soften the shoulders, soften the face. Relax everything, come into the breath. And take about 5 minutes with a short little meditation. If you have a specific meditation that you'd like to do, that you feel comfortable doing, feel free to do that. If not, we'll do a little anapanasati, which basically just means mindfulness of the breath. Begin by hearing all the sounds going on around, the voices, the wind, the trees. Start to take notice of everything that you hear. These aren't distractions in our meditation practice. These are things that are happening in the present. They're happening right now. And take a moment to look into your own personal life and to think of the real distractions that might be coming up. These are maybe thoughts that just have been weighing heavy on your heart, or to-dos, or things that have been coming up frequently, things that you're concerned about. One of the advantages of noticing these types of distractions is that when they come up in our meditation, we're able to recognize them quicker, return back to the breath, and able to see the tendencies where the mind goes. And then oftentimes, when you bring attention to them consciously like this, it means that they're actually not going to come up, and other things that might be at a deeper level that might be bothering you or pertinent or of concern will start to surface, and it allows you the opportunity to look at that. So if you're joining me with the meditation that I'm guiding, it's very simple. With every inhale, the top of the inhale, you'll say 1. The exhale, you'll just release. You'll continue this counting at the top of the inhale until you get up to 10 and return back to 1. Or if a thought comes into the head, then you'll also return back to 1. The goal is not to make it to 10, the goal is only to make it back to 1. Whenever a thought comes in, let it come, let it be, let it go without effort. Bring the focus and the awareness to the sensation of the breath coming in through the nose, exiting out through the nose. Bring the palms to the heart, out of the chin to the chest. Taking a moment for gratitude. Slowly open the eyes. Lift the head. Make a little eye contact with somebody. Yeah, okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. This talk is What is Truth? Kind of an interesting talk. I've actually never lectured specifically just on this, but I feel like it's kind of an important thing to talk about, and I find myself talking about this often in different conversations. It comes up in a lot of different ways. So before I begin, my name is Werner. And I'm not up here to lecture anything. I'm not up here to teach anything. I'm only here to share a very ununique experience, which is my experience, which is probably pretty similar to your experiences, minus the details. Because experience doesn't lie in details. It doesn't lie in what we did. It happens through how we reacted to what we did. And reactions tend to be the same. It tends to be we're either reactive, meaning that something happened and we are triggered by it. It makes us angry, upset, or frustrated. Or something happens and we don't take reaction to it. And then we get to come into our own little piece. So I want to start, I've been trying to think a bit about how I was going to deliver this talk, and generally, like most talks that I do, I kind of just wing it a bit, because I feel like when we really have the opportunity to share something, it's what comes up in the moment. And by being open to the moment, which is, I think, important in this topic in truth, that we're able to reflect what we see in each other. Because every moment is simply a reflection of what's going on, and we see that. So I wanted to come into this to not have so much of an agenda. There's certain things that I want to touch on and go through, but I wanted to more be open to the idea of feeling what you guys bring into it. And so it's also, as much as this is a lecture, I'm happy for this also to be a conversation. And if you have things that you want to bring into it or questions or whatever, I'm happy to take those in as well. And I'll give my viewpoint on it, which is not a right or wrong thing. It's simply just another point of view that I have. Yeah. So I came into yoga, the first time I came into yoga, I was like about 20 years old, and I was doing martial arts. And in there we had yoga like once a week, and it was basically just asana stuff, but it was called yoga, and that was my definition of yoga at the time. And the sensei would walk around and he'd come by and we'd be in boat pose and he'd heel kick us in the stomach. And, so that was my first experience on what yoga was, and that's kind of what I understood yoga to be. It was very much movement-based, breath-based. We also did meditation. Martial arts has a lot of consciousness, a lot of moving into center. Sorry, I'm super thirsty and dry mouth here. And then about a few years of practicing that and then falling away from it, probably because it wasn't really serving me the kind of practice that I needed, I came back into it when I was 29. I'd been rock climbing a lot, and I knew like the physical benefits that yoga had, so I went to a power yoga class, which was hot yoga, Brian Kess style, one of Brian Kess' senior teachers, and I started practicing that and immediately fell in love with it. And as I went through, I started to learn more and more. But at that time, I had a really bad addiction that I didn't want to share with anybody. And this was an addiction that a lot of people have, but I wasn't aware that I had it. And most people have this addiction and they're not aware of it. I would say probably 90% of the people in the world, or 95 or whatever, most statistics are made up on the spot, so I could just throw whatever number out there. But yeah, a large percentage of people have this addiction. And the addiction is to be anywhere other than here. We are constantly in a world where we're looking for distractions. And this is something that is new. We're on our phones, we're looking at something. It's hard for us to be present. And the world is catering more and more to this addiction. And we look at things being short. It's really hard for people to go to, like the way that media is brought to us, how it's consumed. It's always something that is, I mean, look at TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. All these things are feeding that just what is next, what is next, what is next. But where my addiction played out is I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with who I was, so I searched out to be liked. I guess I grew up not the coolest kid. I was bullied quite a bit. I was really short growing up, and I'm sure, like, if anybody's ever had like a really good childhood, I find that amazing. That seems to be the exception of the rule. You might even have good parents, but it's bullies at school or something like that. And it's not necessarily that you had a bad childhood. It's just that the childhood that you perceived wasn't good. And the childhood that I perceived wasn't good. I really hated myself. I had an abusive stepmother who didn't like me. She was young. I didn't really get to see my mother until I was about 13 years old. My father wasn't really in the picture as well. So it was just kind of this relationship between her and I where I was constantly striving for her love. And I think that carried out into moving into an adult life of always trying to prove myself to be good. So I would search out to do things, to be better than, or just not necessarily to be better than everybody else, but to be so good that people would admire me and look at me and like me. I thought that if I tried, if I was really cool, that people would like me. So I wrestled. I was really good in wrestling. I joined the Marine Corps because I thought that was like kind of a cool thing to do. I became a firefighter paramedic. I did basically every sport you could think of, snowboarding, wakeboarding. And one of the last things I got into was skydiving. And it was like, okay, I had a fast car, I had the good job, I had the hot blonde girlfriend, and still I was searching for something more because I didn't really like who I was. And so I thought if I could add more things, if I could do more things, that I would like me and other people would like me. But I didn't know that it was like me trying to like me. It's like I thought if I needed other people to like me. I wasn't even aware that I didn't like myself. Thank you. So I got into skydiving, and it was at this time that I got into skydiving that I felt something different that I hadn't really felt in a long time, and I didn't know what it was. And so I got really, really addicted. I got my license. I was jumping 5 to 10 times every single week, and this is while I was a firefighter. And it was also around the same time that yoga started to come into my life, like in a different way than I had known it before. I went out and I did a teacher training. I was already doing handstands about this time, I'm 29 years old. And I remember my teacher said, it was a 200-hour training, very traditional hatha kind of style. And he said, there's a pose called mountain pose or Tadasana, which is, the way he described it was like standing like a mountain, to be still. And then he told me, I want you to find that same stillness in handstand. And it was the first time that I was able to move into a position where I actually felt what meditation felt like, even if it was a brief moment. And it took me years in seated meditation to get to the same point that I could get to in a few seconds of a handstand with my head down and my eyes closed. And it was also that same thing that I felt jumping out of a plane. It was being present. I'd lived my whole life not liking who I was, that I thought that the future me would be better. And so I was always searching out to like be that person, that I was never with the person that I was. And I think there's a lot of people, we live in this thing where it's either we're trying to go back to the person that we were, so we're in the past, our stories, our memories. It tends to, as you get older, you start to think more about the past. When you're young, you think more about the future of what you have to do. But neither one is true. Both are false realities. And so it was this practice of handstands, and then eventually when I became deeper into meditation, the practice of meditation, that started to reveal what I considered what truth was. In yoga, there's the word for truth is sat. And sat means essentially unchanging. And if you look at everything in the universe is continuously changing. It's always moving. Everything is expanding to entropy. The universe is expanding. I was kind of fascinated for a while by like measurements and like how measurements came into play. And with the meter, all right, so we know like how the foot came into play, but the meter, like how long a meter is. It's a unit of 10. There's actually a bar that's made out of a really, like, I don't know what kind of material it is, and it's in a vacuum, whatever, and it's a meter long. But because of entropy, because molecules are always moving and stuff, it's actually getting shorter. If you go to Greenwich and like where Greenwich Mean Time is in the UK, that place where they set up where this is the prime meridian, this is the 0 point or whatever for time, is, what is it, like 300 meters away from what that original place is or something like that, just because the earth is moving. Not even the countries that we're standing on have been in the same place. In a relatively short time, everything is continuously changing. And so when you look at this idea of truth, if what yoga says this is truth, is it's what is unchanging. Well, how can anything be true if everything is changing? Who you are in this moment is not who you are in the next moment. Right, because you are changing, you're evolving. Just the words that I say, or the words that you hear, or this experience that you have is going to make you something different. So are you true? And the answer to what is true, like when we look at it in this light, and we're going to explore a lot of different things on how we view truth through this talk. If we look at it like what is actually true, there's only one thing, and it's this moment. This window that we see. And it's like being in a train and you're looking through the window and everything is passing by. But what doesn't change is that window that you see it through. And so when we come into truth, when we actually want to be in our truth, it's only coming back to the present moment and what we see here. And now it's going to get a little bit more complicated than that, because now we're going to talk a little bit. First of all, any questions on that? You guys agree, disagree? Manesh, the scholar? Okay. Because I fully do believe with this. If we want to find truth, we simply just look for the present moment. But as you see it, it is not true. And I'm going to present a little paradox here that everything that you know, everything that you've seen, and everything that you've experienced is not the truth. And it also is the truth. And it's really important to know both those things are existing exactly at the same time for you to be able to understand reality, to be able to fit in, to understand each other, to communicate, to love, to connect, to build relationships, that everything that you see is true and nothing that you see is true. I'm going to use words, obviously, to talk about these things. And when we use a word like truth, we have to define what truth is, which I kind of already did. The first one is that which is unchanging. But now I just said everything that you see is not true. And it's not because it's unchanging or changing. It's because you're the one seeing it. Words inherently have no meaning. The only meaning they have is pointing to something that has meaning. And the meaning that those things have only have meaning because we give it meaning. So there's 3 different types of truths. The first time I ever started thinking about this is when I read *Sapiens*, which is a great book. Noah Yuval Harari. Amazing. Yuval Noah Harari? Yuval Noah Harari. Yeah, amazing book. Amazing book. But in here he talks about objective truth, subjective truth, and intersubjective truth. And it's something that has really changed my viewpoint as I've gone to like what I view as being true. So I think the first one to kind of try to wrap our heads around is objective truth. And a good way to think of objective truth is it's whatever is happening when you remove yourself completely out of the picture. If you are not there as the viewer, as the voyeur, that is the truth that is happening, what is happening in this present moment. And there's easy ways to think about it. It's like we're all experiencing gravity. This planet is here. You could say, this wood floor underneath me is truth as it is happening in this moment. And it's not something that we're going to argue over so much, right? It's just those are the things. But we can never experience absolute truth because you're always going to be the one looking at it, which brings us to the next one, which is subjective truth. So subjective truth is how you experience truth. And for a long time, I really thought that subjective truth wasn't truth at all. It was just a variation of it. But actually, subjective truth is the most important truth out there because it really is the only one that you understand. And so to be able to understand your subjective truth will allow you to move into objective truth. But it's also equally important to understand that your subjective truth, what you feel is true, is only true to you and to no one else. You may agree on certain things, but it doesn't mean that it's right. We both go to a movie. Dolly and I, we go watch like the new Batman, which I haven't seen. Have you seen it? I heard, who's it? Robert Pattinson or whatever is the new Batman. Oh, so I spoiled that for you because you're like, I don't even know who the Batman. So I guess that is. But so we both go see it. And I tend to really like superhero movies. I don't like DC as much, but let's say we both go and I love it. And you're like, oh, it's super lame. How they pick a vampire to be Batman. Right? And so we both go see this movie and we saw the same thing, but we have a different reality, right? We reacted different to it, responded different to it, and so we remember it differently. And it's really important that we think about, like, how do I remember something? Because almost everything that you think about is a remembrance of what happened. Not only a remembrance of what happened, a remembrance of how you viewed it happened, which means that it's what happened plus you. There's a word in Sanskrit called vasana, and it means smear, as like to smear a color over something. And the idea with vasanas is that we are kind of wearing these colored glasses, and as you look at everything, you see it through that color. The expression, like, you can't see red flags with rose-colored glasses kind of thing. And so you're looking at the world with these glasses on, and they might be tinted red, they might be tinted blue or whatever, and we all have different vasanas. We're all seeing through different tints. So as we look through that, I see it one way, Ali sees it another way, Manesh sees it another way, right? But we think that we're all seeing it the same way because we've only known that vasana. We've only known that color, that those lenses that we've seen the world through. Coming into truth is often about taking those glasses off and to see things how they really are. When I think back, so there's a big thing with forgiveness. And though I'm not religious now, but I am very spiritual. Those are words. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well, but I have a relationship with both those words that are going to be different than other people, especially in this room, especially in this country, right, with spirituality and religion, and saying that I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. That's because those are my definitions through it. But I grew up, I'm the oldest of 8 kids. My mom had 6 kids. I have 2 stepbrothers. My mom had me at 19. My stepmother that I was kind of talking about, she was a couple years younger. I grew up living in a car with my mom, and then at 5 years old, my dad took me away because obviously you shouldn't have a baby growing up in a Volkswagen Bug. It's not even a big car. And so my mom, she had some drug problems and stuff in her young years, and so did my dad. My stepmother's an alcoholic. So I was taken to my mother, who loved me a ton, into this family where I didn't feel loved. My father loved me, but we didn't have a relationship until my stepmother left. And so I grew up seeing things as a 5 to 13-year-old, which is not who I am now. And I remember after that situation, when I was 10 years old, my mother almost OD'd. She was pregnant with her fourth child. And then she had a coming to Jesus moment, quit doing drugs, found Jesus. And then, of course, I became very religious after that. I was actually, when I was like in my early 20s, I was a youth pastor and read the Bible several times. And that was kind of like my first step into spirituality. But it was all about forgiving. And it was something that I was never able to do to my stepmother. I couldn't forgive her. Even as hard as I tried, I always had some hate, some resentment, something like, how can somebody do that to somebody else? How can somebody be so awful to somebody else? And it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago or so that I was able to see that I wasn't actually a victim. Like, I thought the whole time I was a victim and I needed to forgive her. And the reason why I needed to forgive her is because she did something wrong to me. There's a beautiful story that it's an old Buddhist story, and it's about floating down a river in a boat. And as you go down this river, you see another boat coming at you. And the boat comes in, and you see the intent, like this guy is going to get you, and he smashes his boat right into your boat. The boat capsizes, you go over, you get all wet, and you get back up, and you have all this anger to this person that did this to you. And it says, well, there's a second boat, and you're going down in the river, but this boat's empty, and it's being carried by the current. And you're rowing along, and you see this boat coming down, just carried by the current, smashes into you, the boat goes over, you get wet, you get up, you don't have any malice, there's no ill intent. And what the story does is it teaches us that they're all just empty boats. As we move through life, whatever happens to you, it's just an empty boat. Whatever somebody does to you, they're not doing it to you. They're doing it to themselves. One exception, you deserve it. Sometimes we deserve the bad things that happen to us. I mean, that's basic karma. If I come up and I slap Allie, she slaps me back, I deserve that. That's not an empty boat right there. That is my karma coming back on me. But most of the things that happen where you don't feel like a victim if you deserve it. You only feel like a victim if you don't deserve it. So what I remember as a little boy from 5 to 13 was being a victim, being physically and emotionally abused and locked up in my room for months at a time, not being able to see people. And so I held all this resentment against her. What I didn't see was a 21-year-old alcoholic who was married to a man who was never around, and both of them, lots of infidelity, a lot of hatred, a lot of anger, and a target. So I'm not saying what she did was right, but it wasn't towards me. It was because of her. And when I was able to actually remove myself from that situation and see the situation was more objectively rather than the hurt person, I didn't need to forgive her anymore. I didn't need to forgive her anymore because I wasn't a victim. I could actually, instead of coming at her with hate and anger, I could look at it with compassion and love. And it changed everything. It changed almost all my relationship to everybody that I felt like done me wrong in the past. And instead of being angry, feeling like I need to forgive these people to move on, I just looked at them with love and compassion and saw them for the experience that they were having. This is the subjective experience. This is why it's important to understand that your experience, when we look back in that memory, I'm remembering things as a child, right? That if it happened to me again as an adult, I would see it very differently. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Maybe it was worse. Either way, it doesn't matter because it's not true. It was only my subjective truth, which again, also is true. So we can't let go of subjective truth, because at the end of the day, it is the only truth that we experience. But we have to recognize that it is our truth that we experience. The other truth, before I move on, just so I could cover it, is intersubjective truth. And intersubjective truth is basically just the truth that we all believe in. And this comes from like borders, countries, religion, money. Enough people believe in it, it exists. People stop believing that the dollar's worth anything or Bitcoin's worth anything. Bitcoin is You know, it's got value because people believe Bitcoin has value. An NFT, you go buy a Bored Ape, whatever, yacht club thing, like it's worth whatever it is only because people believe it's worth something. It's worthless, like everything else. It only has value because we give it value. The other thing that's interesting about intersubjective truth is that every intersubjective truth, meaning it's not a truth, it's just a truth that we all believe in, is only there to create separation. There is not a single intersubjective truth that doesn't create separation. At least not one that I've found yet. If you guys come up with one, then titles like Sir, Doctor, King, President, these are used so it shows separation from you being something else. Right? They might be a useful title, like doctor is a useful title, but it's there to separate from the not doctors. You went to school, you get this title to show that all these people don't deserve it. Money is one that creates massive amounts of separation. People have it, people don't. Countries, borders. I mean, this is, I think, even more obvious in this country where it's been closed off to people like me for so many years, and the Saudis being not able to go out and explore. And I never thought I'd be able to make it to this country and experience this because it's always been closed to the West. Growing up, it was closed to the West. And that's based off an intersubjective truth. To get rid of separation, all we have to do is stop believing in these truths. I don't think that'll happen in my lifetime or anyone's lifetime because in many senses they are useful, but there's a lot of intersubjective truths that we really need to learn to let go, or at least to understand that it's not truth. Right? A country is not real. A border is not real. When we start to talk to people, this is almost one of the things that I've found. Actually, before I'm gonna get back to that, and I want to go a little bit more deeper into kind of what we think is intersubjective truth, and this is culture. This took me a long time to really understand and realize how affected I am by my culture. The more that you travel, and I think this is pretty much a room full of world travelers, right? Anybody not a world traveler? So it's kind of like I'm preaching to the choir in a sense. I'm only going to be able to speak for my country, which is the United States of America. America, go Rednecks. I think that's our mascot, or racist. Go. Any other Americans in here? Awesome, I could rag on America all I want. This is perfect. It's like bad. You get like that one I had my last teacher training. I had one pretty pro-America person in there, and so I had to watch how I talked about America because she was really into it. Also, it was her first time ever traveling outside of the country. I wrote a post about this a bit ago. So when I was with this company called Alula Yoga. I'm not with them anymore. And the main reason why I'm not with Alula anymore is because I can not be with Alula anymore. I left them because they were really helpful, but the second that I was financially stable enough and my contract was up, I was able to walk away from that. But I would have to post stuff in their closes, which a sponsorship kind of does. And one of the things they wanted me posting these in shorts, and it could have been any shorts, whatever, but I asked them to send me these pink shorts because I wanted to write a story about this. So I remember growing up as a kid, and I would never wear pink, purple, anything like that, because pink's for girls, right? There's, if anybody likes Ellen, I don't know. There's something with Ellen on this show. She's talking about, I can't remember, some famous celebrity's son had long hair, And she's like, are you ever going to cut his hair? You know, boys have short hair. Girls have, you know, but she has, yeah. But she's like, you should cut his hair. Boys should have short hair. And it's like, it's kind of like, how deaf are you? You know? Anyways, so I grew up always thinking that blue is for boys, pink is for girls, yellow's neutral, whatever. Like what do these colors actually mean? If you go back like into like the 30s or whatever, there was a switch. It was actually, pink was a very masculine color and blue was for girls. And so we actually have this cultural appropriation to things like color and judgments to things that people wear. There's a really there's like a little riddle. So a man and a father and his son were driving, and they were both in a horrific car accident. The father died, and they took the son to the ER, and as they show up at the ER, the doctor was there. It was like, I can't operate on this boy. This boy's my son. How is that possible? Because what? So the father and the boy are in a car. They get in a car accident. The father dies. It's a woman, right? Immediately we go to like, doctors have to be men, right? You're like, well, obviously they're gay, you know, because like you went to that one. You went to first they're gay before that the doctor could be a woman.
It's like you're picking on me this morning, bro.
I'm gonna pick on you all day. Yeah, but that is strong conditioning that we have growing up. Even though that if you look at doctors out there, it's almost 50-50 now, female doctors to male doctors.
And there could be some gay doctors as well.
And there are gay doctors as well. No, you weren't wrong. Okay. They were gay, they adopted. All right, that's the story. That's good. All right. You guys, it's a woman, gay. Both right. Okay. That's your subjective experience with it. When I think about growing up and stuff and what I was exposed to, the things that I like, the food that I like, the type of people that I'm attracted to. When you go back into like when kings and queens and all that, like what was attractive was big, fat, super white people, because that meant royalty. That meant that you didn't have to work the land. You know, fit, skinny, tan people, ugly. Ugh, gross. Because they were peasants. And so our idea of beauty has changed. You think about the foods that you like. You go to Lebanon has amazing food. Lebanese food's so good. Turkish, actually, I really like most food. Whereas really bad food, I don't know. But if you go and you look at the different cuisines that you move to, like there's some Filipino food that's not so good. There's like quite a bit of Turkish meze that I'm not so into, like the weird cold fish stuff. But people love it. Oh, what's the milks? Not for me. You know, but if you grow up drinking that's like the most delicious thing in the world. No, what? Lebanon? It's like Turkish yogurt, but you drink it. And there's like, in Turkey, there's like a soft serve thing, and then they give it to you everywhere, and then... Yeah, it's salty. I'm not in for that stuff. But it's not because I don't like it. It's because I was conditioned not to like it. I was also conditioned to be slightly racist. I was conditioned to be homophobic. I was conditioned to be all these things because I grew up in America, which is a racist, homophobic, closed-minded country that thinks that they're the best in the world. And it's only until you start to move outside of that and you drop those cultural conditionings that you can see who you actually are as a person. Yesterday, I was talking a little bit about, I was thinking about this. This has not so much to do with it, but I was thinking like how I was kind of culturally conditioned to be an asshole. I really was. And I thought that it was like only through yoga, only through mindfulness or whatever that, and this was true for many years, that I was able to not be an asshole. that I could be kind to other people. But I had practiced that mindfulness and that conditioning for so long that my natural state is kind, is mindful, is caring, is nurturing. I would never, ever think of doing the things or saying the things that I've done in the past before I was mindful, or it's just, that's no longer my natural state. So we're able to move past these truths that we've had to find new truths, because that is our ability, because it's your subjective truth. So words only point to things. Words have meaning because we give them meaning. There's nothing inherent about anything. I was talking about the word yoga. So this conversation I had yesterday, I don't know if I gave a talk or just with one of you guys in here, what yoga means. So you guys, those of you who've seen my practice, whatever, it's pretty acrobatic. It was so important for me when I became a yoga teacher to also learn the philosophy. I spent so much time, I can't tell you how many times I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I haven't read all the Mahabharata. I don't know anybody who has. Have you? The whole thing? No, yeah, it's like the long version. I've done like the shorter abbreviated version, whatever, gone through that. Beautiful stories. The Ramayana. It was important for me to know these things, to go through the sutras, to understand the sutras, because I was always so ridiculed for what I was doing was not yoga. And I felt like I needed to defend yoga because, yeah, this is yoga too, right? And so I needed to explain to him, like, no, like, your idea of yoga is wrong. But in that, I was wrong. And it took me a long time to see that. And it wasn't because my idea of yoga is right or their idea of yoga is right. It was because we were both right. Because we gave a different meaning to the word of what it meant. And for some people, yoga means warrior too, or down dog or whatever. Manesh was talking the other day, like back in, turn of the century, the 30s or whatever, when Hatha yoga was really coming around, they said that's not yoga. Right? Yoga's been a movement. It's been a force. It's been a movement that has progressed and evolved. Along with that, so is my definition of what yoga means. And so what yoga means to me is simply connection. I find it more important to talk about what yoga is rather than what yoga isn't. And if I could see the yoga in things, it's more serving to me. But this is just one word that I know that I have a different definition than other people. But it's almost every single word that we communicate with has a different definition. And a lot of times, and I've seen this so many times with relationships or conversations or even heated conversations, whatever, that I'm talking about something, arguing one point, someone else is talking about something and arguing the same point against me. And the thing is not that we disagree with each other, that we disagree with the definitions of the words that we're using. So we go back to, like, what does spirituality mean? What does religion mean? These things only mean something because you have a relationship to it. You have an experience to it. Your truth is your experience. If you want to know what truth is, the definition of truth is it's your experience. But if you only understand your experience of truth, you're going to have a hard time understanding other people, because most people are understanding truth as their experience and they are not open to understanding your experience. But that's okay. Because if you realize that, if you talk to them and you go, so what I call them is subjective and intersubjective words. So a subjective word are things that love, fear, religion, spirituality, history, almost most of the words that aren't concrete nouns are intersubjective words. We don't have to argue what a chair is. You'd be like, no, chairs have 4 legs. You're like, dude, this chair has 3 legs. It works fine. You're like, you're an idiot if you don't know the 4-legged chair. You know what I mean? But it still comes down to, like, these kinds of definitions and things. But when you start to talk to somebody, like, one of the first things I do when I have a conversation, I sit down and they use a word like love, or they use a word like fear or anger or hate or religion or whatever. I ask them to explain to me what that word means. What does that word mean? What does that word mean to you? And then through that, I could ask questions, open up a dialogue. And the other thing that's beautiful with it is you actually get to listen to them and hear them and in a sense, feel and see their experience. And through that, there's an understanding and there's an openness. If you were ever in a conversation where you're trying to be right, you're wrong. Because both of us, you and I, are both entitled to our truth, our subjective truth. And there's nothing that I could do or should do or say that should change your truth. The only thing that I want to do is open up an experience. Meaning, provide a space that nurtures someone else's ability to broaden what they understand is true, to widen it, to be able to see beyond themselves. My mantra has always been, it's not about me. It's not about me. I'm not the hero of my story. I'm only the support character. And we see this world as different because we're the ones looking. The famous thing is like the eye, you can't see yourself if you're the one looking. The finger can't touch the tip of this finger. The knife cut many things, but it can't cut itself. Right? As we see that, we should understand that we're only an expression of this energy. And we're only one window. It's like you go, Nitten? Like, so, Nitten or net? Nitten. So if you have a lot of cameras out there, right? You're out there filming something. You have camera A, B, C, D. They're all just different viewpoints of the same experience. And the more viewpoints that we're able to put around, right? You have one camera over here. It's only showing one view. It's myopic in that sense. And you have to understand that you are inherently myopic. You only have one point of view. And the only way that you could broaden your experience, to broaden what you know is true and come closer to that objective truth, is to try to see through other people's eyes, to try to see all those different angles. There are two things that I'm going to kind of close this talk out, and then maybe we could open up to conversation. There are two things that form your reality. It's your perspective and your perception. Your perspective is where you're seeing it from. And this is a really important one. And it doesn't mean, like, one way is like, I see life as my perspective is a white privileged male, right? Jack and I were talking about this. Like, I'm only going to have that perspective as a white privileged male. I need to recognize that I have certain advantages, too many advantages with being that. Only one that has more is a white female. I'm just kidding. So that's a joke. White hot female. That's not a joke. No, I have this perspective that's the only way that I'm going to see. But the other way so just recognize that. Recognize that you're always going to see things through your culture. And people are going to see you through your culture immediately. You come out, they find out that I'm American, immediately they're going to see me as an American. That's okay, right? Because that's their subjective experience. That's their subjective truth with this archetype, with this person. Some people might see me as a Sagittarius, and they're like, okay, immediately they're going to see me as that, or as a yogi, or as, a tattooed guy, does handstands. We're constantly judging people, but it's more important not to judge people for others, but to judge yourself for your own. The other part of this perspective is how close you are. Most people are really close. And so when you have something that's right in front of your face, it's really hard to see the big picture. And this usually becomes we're only seeing things through our eyes, through our not understanding that everything else is going on. Not being able to widen the view, not being able to see it from other people's point of view, not being able to open up our understanding. So the first part to understanding objective truth is to pull the lens out, to expand, put the wide angle on, to see more of what's going on and less of you in the middle. The other thing is our perception, and that is how we see it. This is something that we choose. Good and bad, right, wrong, those things are subjective words. They're not real. Good and bad is only as real as you understand it to be real. And people understand those things differently. Our enjoyment comes from the preferences that we put on things. If you come and take my training, one of the things, like the big lessons I try to teach is no preferences, and I do that by taking away all your freedoms. And then I tell you, still enjoy it. One of my teachers, Shane Christopher Perkins, about 12 years ago, he asked me, what would your life be like if you had no preferences? And I meditated on that for a long time, and then I went in and did a 9-day vision quest in Sweden where I just meditated on several different things, but that one in particular. And his life is beautiful. If you don't have any preferences, it means that whatever happens to you, whatever situation that you're in, good, bad, it doesn't matter. You have the ability to enjoy it and love it. This forms your truth. It's not about denying your subjective truth and saying it's not truth. It's about understanding your subjective truth in a way that allows you to see the universe how you want to see it, to live the life that you want to see, to be able to communicate with other people the way that you want to communicate with them, to create the relationships that you want, to love and receive love in the way you want. Thank you. I think we probably still have some time. I don't have no